this is Frank Henschker from the Segal Center in Midtown Manhattan. I think it's our talk 148. It's again a little bit cold, grayish day here in New York City, and some church bells are ringing close by. It says it's noon. It means Segal Talk time. And thank you for joining again. We yesterday had the great Emily Mann with us. It was just stunning to hear about 30 years of her leadership at the MacArthur Theater in Princeton, and Carol Martin and joined us. So that was a great update. It says it's noon. It means Segal Talk time. And thank you for joining. I hear feedback. Is that? Do you all hear that? 30 years of her leadership at the MacArthur Theater in Princeton, and Carol Martin joined us. So that.
Sorry, that was me, I think. I'm sorry.
Okay, yeah. So, sorry. We had Fergus Linehan from the Edinburgh Festival giving us an update. What are they planning on Wednesday? It was quite a challenge for them. They open on August, but they don't know how they will open, not if at all. They created new outdoor structures, so he shared his vision, you know, how we all should be going forward. We had David Goddard, who ran the great Riverside Studios in London. We had Kari Perloff with us, and today we stay true to our mission. The mission of the Segal Center always has been to bridge academia and professional theater and the performing arts, but also American theater and international global theater. And today we have with us two Berliners, and like all true Berliners, they are not from Berlin. They come from all around the world, but everybody who is in Berlin is a Berliner. We all hope there are never any foreigners. Once you live there, that's who you are. And we have Joanna Warsza with us. And Joanna, thank you for joining us. And how are you and where are you?
Well, thank you, Frank, for having us. Övül is joining in a few minutes, jumping from another call.
Mm-hmm.
Not like in New York. This is a very nice day, plus 25 in Berlin, and very sunny after Friday afternoon.
Good. I heard after cold days, now the summer, you know, has come. Joanna and Övül, who will join us shortly, created something outstanding, something stunning and beautiful. It was called Die Balkone. Live art, pandemic, and proximity. She initiated that festival together with Övül, and we're going to hear all about it. Let me tell you all a little bit about Joanna, and she is someone who we admire, whose work is important and significant. She's the program director of the Curator Lab at the University of Arts in Stockholm, the Konstfack University, and an independent curator and editor. And she is investigating the social and the political in the arts and in the white cubes, as she says, inside and outside of it. She created together with Övül Durmusoglu, who will come with us today at the Balkone in Berlin. She's involved in many biennales, whether it's in Kosovo, whether it's in Riga, in Venice, in Berlin, and many works you can all look up. So she's a very experienced European curator, and brings for her Polish, Eastern European sensitivity upbringing also with her. So she has a very interesting view on what art and politics or the political is all about. And of course, she also writes and curates and puts things together in museums around the world, also Warsaw, of course. And also she has been at the Segal Center, and she was famous for also one performance where a soccer player all by himself recreated a famous game. Can you tell us 1 second about that, Price?
Yeah, beautiful performance of Massimo Furlan, who recreated many games, actually, always repeating choreography of a main player. So actually, last time I worked with him was East Germany, West Germany match, a famous match from '72 when East Germany despite the expectations 1-0 with Jürgen Speilwasser, and he was recreating Jürgen Speilwasser.
Yeah, and what you do, the stadium is empty, or the normal spectators, no game, and just the one player.
He's alone on the whole stadium. Basically, it's a childhood dream coming true, how to become a famous footballer that he didn't become. And then he became as an artist, this famous footballer, running alone on the pitch. And you sit in the stadium and you hear a comment, either original comment, depending on the match, either original commentary from this match, or as it was in East German, West German case, either East German commentary or West German commentary, but parallel reality.
Incredible thing. And we have now with us Övül. So thank you for joining us. I know you had to jump from another call, and so yes. Thank you for
Thank you for your patience. Thank you for
not at all. Thank you for taking the time. Both of you are such great workers, hard workers in the world of the arts, theater, and performance. And Övül Durmusoglu is the mentor and the program leader in the graduate school in University and the Arts in Berlin. Yes. So we are colleagues in a way, and also a visiting professor for the Hochschule der Bildende Kunst HDK in Braunschweig, the fine arts in Braunschweig. She was a curator for the famous Steirischer Herbst festival in Graz. And in Sofia, she worked in festivals, the Istanbul Biennale, and she was part of the dOCUMENTA, the famous dOCUMENTA, also 13. And together with Joanna, she initiated that thing, the Balkone, the balconies, live art, pandemic, and proximity on windows and balconies of the Berlin's Prenzlauer Berg neighborhood, where she lives, where both of them live, but also so many artists. And we're going to hear all about it. She also writes like Joanna, so Kunst and Frieze and many other things. Thank you. Where are you? Are you in Venice, in Kassel, dOCUMENTA?
Actually, well, I am. I'm in Lisbon at the moment.
Oh, you are incredible, in Lisbon, in Portugal.
So I mean, it's one of the very rare times that I got out of Prenzlauer Berg. So it kind of find our time of our conversation. So yeah, it's not so common that I'm out of Prenzlauer Berg, but here I am today. I'm in Lisbon.
So let's start right away. We all live in the time still of Corona, the pandemic, where we are confined to our homes, where we have been confined to our homes for a very long time. Here, especially in New York, very little happened. We artists very strongly felt not to put their lives at risk, the life of spectators, just for a performance, a show. Online engagements, of course, were there outside, some great outside events at the parks or the Kaufmann Center. Musicians played inside the storefront. They had a fantastic installation, or still have, of speakers outside, and all day long at 3 different times people come to see really significant, important musicians who play for them live, but behind a glass, and many other things, many great walks and things. But what you guys created is something different. So tell us a little bit about it. What were the thoughts behind, and how did it work? Maybe Joanna, can you start?
Yes, of course. Well, I guess we all remember the beginning of the pandemic and the shock of the first lockdown. And in a way, the whole project came also from this kind of shock. That business as usual is stopping, and what does it mean? And both of us met at the park, which is in our district, Prenzlauer Berg, East Berlin, former East Berlin. And as it is, everyone was talking about it. So we, of course, also were discussing the situation, what was, where are we at, and what is. And actually, we also discussed the fact that all museums and theaters immediately wanted to continue digital life in the digital sphere. They a little bit pretended, okay, now we are just switching to the digital. And we felt maybe that's not the best thing to do at the moment, that maybe despite the hard lockdown, actually, maybe it's a moment to test how can art be also a form of resilience in the analog sense. So from this conversation—
So you both met in the park with masks on,
Yes,
in the
with masks
in the
and
winter,
distance.
or Övül, what happened? It was in the winter, or when was that?
It was the early days,
Oh,
and it was
mhm.
March.
March last year.
It was like the March last year, and I think it was like towards the last weeks. I think it was like the
26 or something.
yes,
26
26
when
or
we started
something
our
like
Segal
that.
talks, actually.
Yes,
Yeah.
26th. So actually, you know, and also in my situation, because I'm also working for the art fair in Spain called Arco, and then actually I was in Spain just before the you know pandemic explosion happened in Madrid, and I was also very touched by that as an experience. So basically, I was very lucky, you know, that because I also worked in one of the most collectively, you know, publicly crowded places, and nothing happened. But it was a really like a kind of, it was really pure luck. So I was very also shaken, I have to say, by that experience when I came to Berlin from my side. And indeed, like this conversation, I think was inspiring for both of us. Maybe I'm a Mediterranean person, as someone coming from Turkey, so I also have a very different relationship with balconies and the way social lives like take place in balconies. So this is something really like kind of also very much part of my imagination, but of course it all shifted, you know, with all these meanings shifted with the pandemic, and especially those days when we were conversing with Joanna, it was very much, we were very much struck by the images of people communicating with each other over their balconies, giving concerts to each other over balconies, or, you know, practicing actually their art like from their balconies in order to, so there was this really beautiful moment of really sharing that was happening in the early times of the pandemic that really also inspired us to use that space of maybe make a proposal to our artist friends to use our balconies and to really give ourselves a possibility of taking a ground and expressing how we feel about our situation. And then we can communicate nonetheless, as we are all, we are artists, art producers, thinkers. We can find ways like to communicate with each other in such a time when we felt limited and like cornered.
So that means to imagine it for our New Yorker audience, like in Orchard Street, there are, you know, buildings 4 or 5 stories high, and there, most of them do have balconies. They're not too far from each other. You could perhaps even still shout right across the street. Yeah. And hear someone. So you were observing each other, like in Hitchcock's Rear Window, and you saw people making art. So this has happened very fast then, Joanna. I don't know, March was a very beginning. It was clear to both of you, this will take a long time to get back to what is supposed to be the normal, and you felt the absence of your normal work, and you said, let's do that right away. So it happened in March, April, right away you did that, or?
We took action very clearly, like just to close, to bridge to Joanna. I mean, from the moment of this park conversation to like when we wrote the text, it was in 10 days. And when we took the action, it was basically in the next 10 days. So everything took more or less like the time of like 18 to 20 days. So
when did it happen? In April?
It happened. It happened Easter, on the Easter weekend in April, 12th and 13th of April last year. But then also it happened this year again on the 1st of May.
So tell us a little bit, what was the scope? How many people were involved? Maybe you have some images to share. How did it look like?
Well, you know, first of all, also why we did it, to come back to the previous question, it also was a feeling of, you know, being a Berliner, being in Berlin in the time of pandemic, and realizing that actually what is special about Berlin and also about New York to a degree is that you have so many artists per square meters, that they come from so many different backgrounds. You know, it's somehow the locality of Berlin, that we were all stuck there, and the global nature of people living here came together in this moment. And the idea to send each other signals through art. And also the idea that you know, of course, the most important professions, and this is what is called in Germany system relevant professions, were not the artistic professions, but our question was, what could we do also as curators and artists? So it came out of the need in a way to react to the situation. And then, as Övül said, we formulated this letter. It was also like a test. We formulated a letter to our neighbors, both to the artists we knew and also those we didn't know. And it was a little bit like a snowball effect, you know, that people kind of felt, they felt intrigued and they felt taken by this proposal. So they reacted. It was, you know.
A letter, I mean, you printed something out and distributed it in mailboxes?
We wrote a text together and we used emails, of course.
Yeah. Still some digital sphere was used in the preparation of this project.
Yeah. So it was very magical, this process that Joanna is describing. It was very magical for us. It really was, you know, almost there are certain things on the world that, you know, when you put this idea on, it really takes you in front of it and it pushes you to realize itself. So we really felt also through this way with the beautiful reactions that we received from our community to realize it. And we started with a circle of 12 friends, so to say, and in the end we became around like 50, and the community was growing even until the last day, you know, because everybody wanted to join, and it was also the possibility, of course, like to do it from home, to use the domestic space also as a studio space sometimes, and like to use complete DIY tendencies in order to make, you know, in order to send out a smoke signal to the neighborhood and to the world, and to show that, you know, we exist, we are here, we communicate, and we take our space.
Almost in that sense of auto, to signal through the flames, you know, and that we are there, that we exist, and we do care about each other. Or N. Bogart said, it's kind of a knock knock at the door. How are you? Was it some streets, you say these are 4 streets, a square, or everybody in that kind of Prenzlauer Berg would be something like Soho or Chelsea in New York? It's like a larger neighborhood. So how did it work? Do you say these are the streets where we live in, and or was it distributed around the neighborhood?
Well, you know, it started from Prenzlauer Berg because this is where we live. And then, yes, you see that in a way, the neighborhood became a blurred border. We are not, you know, there were some people on the edges, but it's a big neighborhood, and the best is like in Münster to visit it with the bike. So it was not on 2 free streets, but still it was a neighborhood project, and the project that also revived the idea of what it is to live next to each other, and be able to do the knock knock, as you said.
Yeah, and also I think German, as I am German, our a life at home, the private space, you know, is something very, in a way, almost sacred. If you get invited to a family, it means something, you know, it's not as open as it should be, perhaps, as in our, you know, European neighbors and our friends. And as we heard, you know, that the use of public space and balconies is different. So it's a great, perhaps, recalibration of a city life. And how about the audiences? How did that work? And did people know about it? They discovered it while it happened? Was it a surprise, kind of a guerrilla art? Or how did people join in?
Well, it also, I mean, a little bit of all of what you mentioned, but of course it also transformed, you know, towards the 2nd edition. But in the 1st edition, it was very slight gestures, sometimes big, sometimes slight gestures, sometimes like the whole buildings were used, you know, neighbors also were invited, and sometimes sometimes it was just like a kind of a very small, you know, like a kind of an arrow or a sign like that was referring to a particular situation. But in terms of our communication with the public, we used social media, because at that point also we just distributed everything through Facebook, basically. And then we made the link, and then we also like created a very different map of our neighborhood that is also very important, I think, to share here, because it's a really different cartographic exercise, psychocartographic exercise as well, because we wanted to protect the privacy of our artist participants, we actually put very approximate points on the maps, but not their addresses. So it wasn't like this kind of pinpointed that can be GPRS kind of addresses that we gave to our public, which is generally different than other public space projects. So we really kind of differ over there. And it also like invited our audience to play the game, to our public to play the game with us in terms of which balconies around could be those balconies. Because so sometimes the gestures were big, but sometimes the gestures were subtle. So, and then it was then in a whole different way of relating to the neighborhood, also to make us realize basically when we are going like head forward to a certain address, we also lose actually the relation with the surrounding. So this was also an invitation back to looking around ourselves in a kind of a different way. And we saw like really people sharing information on each other with themselves, like which address is where, which artists maybe is like maybe doing so or what, and like informing each other, or like trying to find all together a certain balcony and making guesses. So these were very beautiful conversations for us.
So for me to understand, it's not that you had to be a neighbor across the street. It happened also live. You could go on the Facebook sites and see what the 12 or 20 or at the end 50 artists were doing, or was it, did people walk around the streets in their mass to look up? Joanna, maybe you tell us a little bit, how was that? How did it happen?
Yeah, well, we really were analog in the project. It was a project that was also like a new dimension of the public, you know, creating public sphere through art. However, of course, there is a first audience, which is there on the streets. And that was a hard lockdown. So really maximum 2 people together could walk. But it was absolutely, you know, it was doable. Of course, you are free to go for a walk. But obviously, as with many projects, there is secondary audience, a third audience. So later on, you can still see it on our website, and you can experience those projects. And actually, from this very local neighborhood initiative, this project, you know, got covered by Reuters and another press agencies, and got
Agence France, I think also Agence France Press,
yeah. But also others, and it got its editions in many other countries. In a way, it grew and inspired other neighborhood projects who then wrote to us and made their own. And that was also it's a true bottom-up project. It's not that we now claim we have to curate it somewhere else. It kind of got contaminated.
What are the other cities? Where did it happen? In what other places?
It happened in Paris. A version of it was realized in Paris through our really good colleagues, and then another version was realized in actually Chile, starting from Santiago to Chile, in the whole Chile, and another version was in Delhi, like it was more like a smaller artist project, and one actually in our city in Kreuzberg was an artist group also who took the idea over and called it This Is an Intervention. And then there was also another version in the close by version in Sweden, and then also in Taipei. So it was really like there were a lot of communications over like transnationally over balconies and even over oceans.
Incredible, almost like instructional art. You had some instructions, be in your neighborhood, create something in your balconies, share it, you know, with the neighbors, and give freedom to artists to, you know, explore whatever they would like to do. I would like to ask both of you a question. So many artists we talked to, also curators, said when the lockdown started, life came to a halt. It was a shock to the system, kind of a car that, you know, brakes and flips, and you're still in the air. You don't know where you land. And people say it was a time we took out, we reflected, we went to our inner selves and communicated and understood, you know, what we did was too fast, too much, and we lost some connections. You guys very fast created something. And do you both feel this was a continuation of your practice because you wanted to continue, or was it something new where you felt we have to engage now in a different way, and not being in Venice and Sofia and in Poland and all around the world, in Portugal and Spain? We do something in our neighborhood. So tell me a little bit what that moment meant to you and how it is really connected to the concept and vision of the project.
Well, you know, as we know, in the moments of crisis are good moments to rethink certain things, right? They are shaky moments in which you see the power dynamics, which you see your routines. So I guess it was more also of a gut feeling that for us who are so-called independent curators, we are not a big institution that now will think what to do. We can react quite fast. That was also, it was intuitive in a way, but then later we thought about it, that it was also this condition of being independent, in fact, interdependent. How can we now express the fact that we are interdependent through art? And also, can art be also an expression of necessity of this moment and maybe some kind of recovery? Because we were craving for sense, all of us, right? We were craving to understand the moment in which we are. And definitely art is a medium which can try and help us to sublime this moment, to show signals, you know, to augment it, to turn it, to recontextualize it. And so, you know, it was a gut feeling, but of course, somehow something was telling us, yeah, we need to do it right now.
Yes, we both, as Joanna said, definitely, like it was that intuitive, that was the push that really like made us also organize ourselves in a very fast way in order to respond rather than to retreat, because I think we both believe that the responses that you give to the moments of crisis very much then defines, you know, how you relate with it also afterwards. And then we refused to take a step back. In a way, we wanted to move forward and we wanted to take the challenge and see what is there for us, which is, I think, also, yes, I mean, also in the project space, but I think also personally, it was very, very formative gesture, you know, in terms of like changing the relationship with the crisis. And indeed, you know, indeed, art has always a very particular, you know, responsibility in relation with the moments of crisis, in witnessing and in transforming in the moments of crisis. But at this, in this part, it was more like kind of stop and see. And at the same time, it was also, yes, it is soon going to be over. So we are going to go back to our normal lives as, you know, once this is over. So most of us also like kind of, I think, felt that by the time 1 year is over, or by the time even like the springtime was over, this will be over. But it, you know, it's still not over, and we are still inside it, and we are still like actually like growing with it, also human-wise, you know, and also in relationship to our surroundings. So, so curatorially, I think both of our practices really carry that strong relationship with the formations of public spheres. And like also to believing in that kind of gesture creation in order to intervene into the collective memory of public space, where the action also takes place, and where the kinds of actions, especially like art takes, can also reframe, you know, that public space. And this is also like kind of the most visible, I guess, like in arts and performance history in very various critical moments. Mm-hmm. And then also like kind of one maybe important thing to add, that we also believe that there is actually particularly being stuck, you know, in the kinds of formats that we are using for that art world. May it be the fair, may it be the biennial, may it be, you know, may it be like kind of the museum exhibition structure. So we felt actually both that there is something that needs to be like kind of addressed and changed, but nobody really kind of knew and wanted to continue, despite, you know, there were all these different reactions and responses that were growing. So I think also in that sense, pandemic also pushed us like the question, okay, what about the new formats that need to respond? So because clearly we cannot go on doing the same thing. The world is asking us to do another thing. And so we really need to also take an action in order for doing that, so that we can also go along, in a way with the creative flow and lead the way open towards other things also socially. This is also still a kind of a major question that remains, because we also saw actually our professional arts colleagues started to respond differently in the second edition than the first edition.
When did the second edition take place? Was it a year? Just 1 second.
Each other.
The second edition was 1 year later.
Right. Yes.
And what were the numbers? How many people participated, and what was the difference to the first one? Maybe Joanna, you can tell a bit.
Yeah, Joanna, maybe you start, I continue.
Yeah, well, the second edition was also going against how biennials are normally reinventing themselves anew, right? Or exhibitions or premieres, or why do we need to start from scratch while we already have this wonderful neighborhood and so many artists here? So actually we addressed the invitation to all the artists again with the same artists. Obviously, naturally, as it is in life, some moved out, some others moved in, somebody was already traveling. But the pandemic condition, the idea of being a neighbor, but also looking closer where we actually live, what is former East Berlin, what has become with this gentrified place, which is Prenzlauer Berg, what is the East German history of this place? Those questions were not there in the first edition, and they naturally throughout this first year arose. So the second edition was, even more participant, almost the same, 80% the same, plus some new ones.
Maybe show us some images so we can get an idea if you have something.
Course.
And
please,
so
I'm sharing right now. Yeah, can you? Sorry, it has to open. You see the massive backdrop of my computer? Or just
we are working crazily at the moment, so it's all around.
Right. So, for example, this is a piece that. Sorry. You can see it, or I'm trying to.
We are just seeing the list, John, at the moment. Still, you trace the images, but we don't see the images.
Okay, let me. And now?
I guess it's coming.
It's uploading. Yeah.
Screen is paused. Stop share. Okay, well, one more time. Sorry.
Okay.
So we get an idea of it. Yeah.
Look here.
Yeah, maybe also in the meantime, I can kind of introduce the fact that actually with the, of course, support of our community, with the generous support of our community and our public, we also decided to move into different researches that we are kind of connecting, with the public gesture, and also with that public-private relationship that we are interested in. So the second edition also not only involved, the regular balcony, or kind of becoming regular now, like kind of balcony interventions, but there also existed like kind of different public space researches about the monuments in our neighborhood, and also some of and then also domestic as artistic archive. So we also, because Prenzlauer Berg is a kind of a well-known also neighborhood for the early after wall, very artistic neighborhood, very highly populated, and is still highly populated, as Joanna says. So how do we trace actually the domestic, the artistic archive in the domestic space? And that was also a particular inspiration, for example, came from the apartment that I live in, which used to be the apartment of Ricky Travanija, who's a nomadic, also long-term New York resident artist. And he was there with his ex-partner for a really considerable amount of time, and produced really important works in that period that that heightened his name and his artistic legacy, in the contemporary art circles. For example, like we had that kind of a special project in my house with his kind permission and encouragement to really give an excess of the work that he had done in the house, in the period of the house, and to connect the house to his New York and Chiang Mai residences.
Give us, both of you, a little bit idea what happened really on the balcony, so we can get an idea or an image. What was the actual thing?
Can you see the image now? It's like it's there. I think I can see mine. My screen works. So
yeah, we see a house facade, balconies, and two large train station-like clocks.
Exactly. So this is it's a piece of David Rich, one of our neighbors, which is called Untitled Perfect Lovers / Untitled Our Times, because it's actually a tribute or a remake of a famous work of Maria Gonzalez Torres from 1997 that shows two clocks which are going in synchronized clocks. However, because they are not atomic clocks, at one point, one of them will go out of sync. And it was a project made at the moment when his partner was diagnosed with HIV. So another pandemic period. So David brings back this work, shows those clocks only with the hour only hours, drawn, also to kind of maybe signal and reflect back at the flow of time that we have been experiencing in this last year, in a way, these days being so similar and time flowing, but also, of course, putting this on one hand, two pandemics which cannot be compared, and yet they are both pandemics, they are both state of exceptions. So putting those two experiences together, and it was one of the first and maybe one of the most powerful artworks he installed in his windows.
Yeah. So it is also, I think we also see it as a very important, like kind of a nod, like here David makes in, for us, like what did we learn from that, last pandemic, and what did it remain that did we learn our lesson as humans? Did we learn to, care about each other? Did we really change a little bit our attitude? So he really beautifully also connected, these two periods, which we would remember as, I think, also as Douglas Crimp's beautiful expression of mourning, militant mourning. So I think David's piece was also in this, was an act of militant mourning in this way.
Yeah, and also away from photography, what Douglas wrote a lot about, to pieces. Were this more closer to visual arts, or do you also had bodies of people performing things?
Various. It was various, really. It was really depending on in all the different practices. And we also had different artists closer to performing arts that responded differently, and with all of their actually artistic expertise.
Yeah, but just for me, I cannot see the photos because they are hidden by by your images. Maybe you have to do it full screen, so we cannot see.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm sorry, I'm having problems. Yeah. You guys talk, and I try to fix this and show you.
If not, don't worry about it. We can always look it up and.
No, but just to add this, because about the genre of this exhibition, it's an exhibition, but because neighbors are coming, from all disciplines. They're musicians, they're theater makers, they're writers, or they're visual artists. At the end, it was very interdisciplinary. So last year we had Rabia Mroue and Lina Madeleine, who actually invited all the neighbors, and the whole building spoke for itself in a way, in a performative way. And in both editions, we had Susanne Sachse and Mark Ziegel, who were queering the streets with the performances from their balconies. So we did absolutely had also the, live performance, a lot of live performance actually. Maybe we can,
actually in the first work of Susanne and Mark, actually, like one of the figures that they mourned because they lost 3 friends, including Douglas. also Tabea Blumenschein and like Volker Schlondorf, they commemorated them all together, and their relationship actually, you know, to an alternative like way of thinking life and how they contributed to that. And then they mourned actually also, you know, in the first edition with their in a kind of a very beautiful phantom-like fountain experience. So the speech was recorded and it was given to the street like every 20-30 minutes, and then and sometimes in German and sometimes in English, like kind of alternately like moving. But there was no one to be seen in the balcony also, but only the images of Douglas Tabea and Volker Schlondorf that really created, especially in the first edition, I think when of course the streets were much more less populated, for example, the voice echoed throughout the whole street. It was very poetic. And then of course in the second edition, they again used up, you know, like made a second gesture very much similar to that, but this time with the images of Bini Adamczak, Paul Preciado, and Vaginal Davis. Some of you may be familiar with Vaginal, also an American artist based in Berlin for a very long time now. So exactly, so this was like the piece, the letzte Mal, erste Mal. So they were actually referring to that, like when was the first time and when was the last time, but they were very much also breaking at the moment the code of a very gentrified neighborhood. So they were also like asking very radical questions, such as like when you had last time had sex in public space. So really like kind of pushing against also the norms that define our public space at the moment, and like then the queering also our experience in a very particular way. And then the audience were also like able to participate further this time by receiving actually like different instructions that you mentioned. And that is in the form of questions to really also like think about when was their first time and when was their last time.
Do you have some kind of statistics who say how many people kind of saw it, enjoyed it, recognized it? Is there?
It's the beauty of public projects that you really actually never have the kind of number, because the number is also very much, I think, very part of like liberalization of art, like art as an industry, and like kind of counting people with numbers. But I think one of the beauties of the public space is like that actually kind of it's unidentifiable. But we could certainly see that thanks to really good press coverage by some really important also writers, different newspapers, we received a different kind of public that we saw who came also for the project when we were
for sure 10,000
touring around the neighborhood. As you can imagine, we were touring around the neighborhood with our bikes back and forth. And
for sure tens of thousands of people as first viewers, and then as you said, second and third viewing, and we are now looking at it. It is a stunning reinterpretation. And do you feel you learned something or something, what changed your practice? Was that significant, or was it something we say, this is something we did in between, but we will reconnect to our earlier work? What is the...
Well, no, definitely it has changed us tremendously. I mean, first of all, we started to work together from this.
How do you know each other?
Well, we knew each other as neighbors and as colleagues, but not very well. So we now a curatorial duo and do biennials. That's the first thing. But more on the systematic meta level is that you also see, for example, in that this project was based so much on an economy of gift. In the first edition, it was completely zero budget. It was really to send a signal, to give a gift of sorts to others, or to, if you will.
You had no budget, nobody got paid, not €1
Nothing.
exchange. It was a complete free and open artwork.
The first emergency
edition, yeah.
The first emergency edition, and nobody asked a single question. And of course, we are all very sensitive about being paid, right?
Yeah.
But there was something just inappropriate, I think, because nobody really asked. It was not needed. The money was not in the horizon, and that was very liberating. Also, that there were some other needs to do this than just having a fee, right? And in the second edition, we got a grant from Berlin, but we tried to keep somehow, and I think we managed to keep still this idea of a gift, the idea of sharing, of certain generosity. And also as curators, you know, we were much less policing towards the artist. We were much less controlling. It was still based on, because how can you really oversee if this is something which is really coming from your domestic sphere, from your living room? You know, it's like when I'm coming to your place, of course, I feel I'm a guest. So we were curators, but we were also guests in those people's lives. Therefore, we cannot be in our capacity of a dramaturg, curator, overseeing. And this actually created much better symbiosis and much healthier relationship with all these artists. We were even thinking like how it's possible that, you know, we didn't do so much for the production because it's again bottom up, and still most of the artists were writing very grateful messages, even if they did all the work, you know. So what happened? And probably what one of the answers is this: yes, how can art be more in in the sphere of the necessity, in the sphere of being a gift, of being a sign of our interdependency. So we managed somehow to touch, the project managed to touch on those issues. So, you know, this definitely is something we carry on with us.
Yeah, how interesting and important to actually, I was not so clear to me to think, yes, you actually are not in the gallery, in a museum, in a performance space, you are at the home. And the artist is the host. And that bizarre constellation, normally you watch television and someone comes on your screen and says, welcome, you know, but it's your home. And here it's something very different, but it's also the artist says welcome, but it's really his or her home. And it's a radical transformation of practices where normally people start out, like the living theater started out in a living room. So many performance artists started out in their own spaces, and actually these were the great, often they said these were the great times, or it ended in small spaces like the Squad Theater in Hungary, when they were forced to leave, you know, but they couldn't perform anything anymore outside, so they went to their own apartments, and then it was filmed supposedly by a friend, and then it was from the Secret Service, and they had to leave overnight the country. So there is something closeness and intimacy. Tell me both a little bit of this idea of that socially engaged art, the one Claire Bishop writes about, Tanja Bruguera works about, something that also Florian Malzacher and others, you know, who Joanna knows so well, they are partners who you work together to the idea that something needs to change, has to change. What is your curatorial practice? What has it been all along, and where are you going to? Where does that fit in?
Well, I mean, maybe with a big question, so we can devise a whole new seminar, you know, on the question that you're asking.
Yeah, you could.
Because we
go back to the faces, maybe, Joanna. So,
I mean, just like also to add to what Joanna said, I think this was the sense of trust that, you know, we managed to build, you know, in our artistic networks, but also in our conversation also with each other, that really like enabled such a project of generosity like to happen. Because in order to be able to, you know, give to outside, first we need to give to each other. So that becomes also clear, this act of generosity. So this, I think, was very clear in both of the projects. And then of course it also I guess very much like heightened our desire to try new models, to experiment further, and not to lock ourselves, you know, within that kind of particular defined formats in the way we are expressing and in the way we are expressing our work our thoughts, or in the way that we are like facilitating or activating different connections between different spheres, different artistic spheres, and sometimes also even like activist spheres. But I would say, I mean, I know, of course, like there's a really like a very particular strong like theories and socially like engaged practice. But from my side, I think there is a kind of a huge change, you know, after Tahrir Square, in the way, you know, people start to communicate with each other, the public space, and intervene in that kind of collective memory of oppression.
Yeah.
They changed something, I think.
And Tahrir Square is Istanbul, you refer to,
and
right?
also Gezi Park. So I would love to
Gezi
also
Park,
connect
yeah.
to Gezi Park, because also these days, as we are commemorating the 8th year of Gezi Park, which is something so important for our generation in Turkey. So this was really like a kind of an intervention, or a kind of a refuse to kind of live with that oppressive memory of the public space and try to create something within. And then I think this becoming a kind of a whole living practice so easily also, I think, made us like then question, or like kind of ask about like the current definitions of socially engaged art. And then also another maybe question like on this line would be, what is not really socially engaged anymore? Because we are actually like in the period right now where artists would like to be more enablers, you know, and doers, more and more even, that we see this tendency, you know, in contemporary art. So it is, yes, it is still like a kind of an outcome of a, you know, of a video or like an installation, but the process of enabling the whole communication that goes on to realize that piece, to touch something, a kind of a critical point in history or in a community's memory, is really like about enabling and doing something. And then we also see how artists then become speculative thinkers, they become like historians, they become fiction writers. So they really take on these different roles in order to enable. So I really do think, you know, these experiences also really shift our understanding and practice of social engagement in arts today, which clearly also shaped and being reshaped by what we experienced in the Balkone, and what is also being reflected in other projects that we are realizing together with Joanna. But Joanna, maybe
Joanna, in your field of vision, in your work, where does that fit in? And where do you see, where is it going? And was it always part of your work to do such a project? And it just happened at this moment?
Well, you know, we spoke about the stadium piece. It was also in that logic, right? Art being outside of the white cube, art being actually in relationship with the society. For me personally, art always feels too lonely in the museum. When I go to the museum and I see art object, it feels too abstracted. It feels too lonely. I've always been interested in working with art in context. And the Balkone is one of these very strong contexts for art, you know, where art really shows itself as a necessary part of the larger society. When it shows itself as almost like a snowball effect, because it opens visions, yeah? It opens ideas. This year, to give an example, we had a fantastic, we had a contribution of Turkish Kurdish artist Pinar Ogrenci, and she just looked at the name of her street, which is a name of a landlord from 15th century. But then she looked at, in the history, there were like just few years when this street was named after a woman, after a social activist. And she brought back an image of this woman. And with this, she brought back all these questions. Why are streets called how they are? Who are they called after? How many streets are called after women and how many after men? And, you know, this opens like a huge questions about public sphere. And the fact that, for example, in Berlin, I would be curious to know how it is in New York, out of the streets named after human beings, only 10% are named after women. And why is it so? I mean, of course, on one hand, we know why is it so, but what can we do about it? And actually, all these questions were opened by an artist. So this is what I mean by, art sitting and being interdependent. Because
I'm placing it in our links, by the way, just for you also to view independently.
Yeah. So for me, it's also interesting to go generally beyond the culture of mere display, because it's not only about display, it's about having an effect in the world. It's about actually one of the meanings of performativity, as John Mackenzie was defining it, right? And of course, from Austin on, having an effect. So finding a form which can be subversive and effective at the same time. So this kind of public art, which is not drop down plop art and the bad image of the public art that has grown with the public art for many, many years, being out of a context. This is really in the context. It's the opposite. And I think it gives a lot of hope in how can art function in the society.
Yeah.
Since we talk here normally a bit more about theater, performance, or dance, what do you guys think about theater? What works, what does not work for you, or performance? Do you even watch it? What is your relation? Like, you're two art curators. What do you think about theater?
Maybe you remember when we met 2009, then I was still a theater curator.
Yeah.
And then somehow because I did theater studies, and then I migrated to the neighbors, which is visual arts more. Also because I found more discourse and more like, more, open-mindedness. Maybe it's in the Eastern European context in visual arts. So I very much believe still in theater and the performative act, but there is some burden to it, which visual arts didn't have. That's why somehow I migrated there. But I do believe in performativity very much.
I mean, from my side, I would say I kind of have a reverse relationship in terms of my especially teaching, because what I am doing in the graduate school is really transdisciplinary artistic research, which means that we are really having different lines of art. Different researchers who are engaged with music, with stage, with the discourse of stage, and with film, alongside visual arts or kind of installation arts. And in this period also I get to connect with, I would say, more choreographers also on my side, who are working on stage and who are trying to find ways to decolonize their practice, and then engaged in this also more discursive research, inviting me as their mentors in their process. For me, kind of coming back from visual arts, and I'm coming mainly from the field of language and cinema. I studied translation studies, and I started as a film writer, and then moved on to visual arts. I find these conversations for me very very interesting on kind of the discourse of performance and how it can be shifted, and how that shift can be translated to the act on stage, to the body on stage, and what it means also for a visual arts person like me to be part of that process. I find it very liberating. This is something very new in my life as of this year.
No, it is a quite stunning project what you both created. Congratulations, really, on pulling it off, first of all, but also really it connects to so many things. Your past work, your present work, also a future work. I think it contributes and also highlighted the change the field is taking. Bernie Furtman, who we also had in our program here, who wrote the Offsides Contemporary Performance beyond the site specific. People said, it's just, let's see something interesting in that old factory. We see something in that old swimming pool that's not used, and people will enjoy it more than going to the old-fashioned theater. What you guys do, of course, the context, the neighborhood, the community, the history of the place, that the place already has a history, that it performs its history through the artist, and that it helps us to create a meaning, and also highlight, what art really is all about, and that you do not need the machine, so much of perhaps a bit more in visual arts, I don't know enough, but also in theater, it's about feeding the machine, which is so hungry, always something new, with a breathless run, especially in New York City, a city where they say they never sleeps, but always dreams, and it doesn't rest, and there's something we realize is not good about it. And you found something that is of importance as a symbol and as a part of an imagination of a new world. Did artists you work with, did they mostly stay in Berlin? Did they leave? Was this project part of they feel more connected? What were how did they feel about it?
They do live in Berlin, and we received actually in the first edition some questions from the journalists that they thought that we were implementing artists in our neighborhood, but we said no, these artists are living in our neighborhood. We are not.
No, I mean, they didn't leave. So many artists left New York City.
Yes, I mean,
for many reasons. How was it in Berlin in pandemic?
They are here. They are here.
They are more and more here. Like we still, despite actually, it's not what it used to be. Of course, as we were mentioning about like the gentrification problem. So there is a big housing crisis also in Berlin in the horizon. That's it's very much there because of the real estate prices and with the high demands of the city. But still, like artists also from various parts of the world, like they come to live still in Berlin. And despite the fact that they are not able to always show in Berlin, or they not really know about their existence in Berlin because institutions don't always invite them. Actually, also our project also showed something, that we take the matters also in our own hands rather than waiting for that moment to really also like show that production and show that like kind of really important critical input to our city. And maybe like I would like to also add one thing that you said that you found something, but I wouldn't say it's actually found because it was there. We just listened to the call. And it's of course, the way we are listening to the call, of course, it's a nod to all of these artistic histories and legacies that actually worked in this field, clearly. But because of those things have been done, then we are able to respond it also in a different way, I believe.
How are you following up on this as a curator duo, as a dynamic Prenzlauer Berg duo that you, if I understand right, also that pandemic brought you together. You realized you were neighbors and you realized you have a vision and you created something that, really produced something very meaningful to so many who participated in it. What is coming after this? Are you going to collaborate? Do you have new projects? Or are you going to bring this, let's say, to Palermo or cities or Istanbul, where the balconies, are of significance? We once had a reading of a play in Rome. This was all about the neighbors. These kind of courtyard houses. Where there are the balconies, and you see and hear. And Vicini actually was the neighbor. So, what are your projects?
We are actually very, very busy because in 1 month from now, or even less, opens a biennial that we do in Kosovo. It's called
You're both together.
Together, yeah. It's called Autostrada Biennial, taking place in 3 cities: in Pristina, Prizren, the very old city of Western Balkans, and Peja. And of course, it's not about the Balkone at all, but what we bring from this experience is that that art doesn't land there out of the sudden, that art is a part of a conversation with a local community. So for example, or their wishes or their dreams. We actually listened when we went there for the research trip. We just listened to so many interesting people. And based on what they were telling us, we kind of constructed the exhibition as a response to what they were saying. So the piece we open with is in collaboration with LGBTQI community and the Pride Parade in this region, which is, as you probably can feel, it's not, it's a very vulnerable structure.
Still dangerous business. Yeah.
It is still dangerous business. It's the 5th edition. Yeah, it's the 5th edition.
So it's based on this host and guest dynamic. It's based on the diasporic and the local host and guest. and art is a tool. It's some kind of a glue, some kind of skin that helps those two sides meet.
So from the balconies to the Balkans, you went.
Yeah, one can say that.
Good one.
But what else is on? I know you guys are planning other things. What are you or Joanna on your own? What are you working on? What's on your mind? Share a little bit of your ideas.
Well,
I mean, this is actually like at the moment, the project Joanna mentions is what is all on our minds. You know, like especially the project in the collaboration that we are realizing with the community in Kosovo in terms of their also legal civic campaign for equal rights and visibility in the society, with the help of two amazing artists, Petrit Halilay and Alvaro Urbano, that we will be able to make an installation of their work in the National Library in order, in order to help the campaign and also give the project also the project that they realized another agency as part of its journey, and to really also discuss this different model of collaboration and integration, and how actually a biennial as such can respond to an on-site question, and how it can also like challenge its format, and like also even makes itself also more vulnerable as opening it more like to this everyday struggle. And I think our work in the Balkone both also opened us even more further to like this kind of connection with the everyday struggle, and like how we can bridge, as curators, how we can facilitate art's response to that everyday struggle and its part in it. So this is really like an important, like a kind of a format change for us, because we are clearly challenging the biennial format as it is with every gesture that we are realizing also inside this project, because we are also looking for something new, which then the majestic floral installation of Petrit and Alvaro also become a symbolizing for our search as well. And then we hope to continue also in the autumn with in Riga with the 12th edition of the Survival Kit Festival, where we are then bringing another infrastructural question like there to question the nature of survival kit today, and how again then art becomes means and carries agency in the questions around survival, and especially in the constructions in the age and care constructions of our liberal society today.
Yeah, no, it is so important, and especially also to do work in Kosovo. We know Jeton Netsirai, who once, I think, ran the National Theatre of Kosovo, that then was being threatened just to be destroyed. Such an important place for some real estate reasons, or perhaps people didn't like it, and how he did a play and toured around, and he told us how complicated the LGBT question still is, and what they were facing when they performed these things. But I think what you offer, theater and performance, is in a way, I think Bertolt Brecht once said a really good critique of the car was an airplane. He said, it's not just that how do you make it faster? What different color? Maybe you have 4 mirrors or whatever. He said, no, he said, let's fly or something. So I think also what you put up there is something that, lifted, like the Mars, a little helicopter that even if it made not high, it was done in a small way. But as they pointed out, also the very beginning of flying were small. So there's something you connected to, and it's very meaningful comment and critique and encouragement also for the performing arts communities to really think through that concept of what you represented in your work. So basically, because nobody knows what will happen, you are not planning anything for next year. For example, the year after, you're still open. All the cultural institutions, they are holding back with future plans. What's the situation?
I think we are planning the Balkone Drive. The Balkone
Okay.
For sure. Yeah, this is what we are planning.
So maybe we should think of a New York edition. We find something to do it, and how we can find a place, you know, where traditionally artists did live, like in that, or once used to be the Lower East Side. Now it's Williamsburg, you know, and maybe we can get you over if we find some funders, you know, or so you are also for hire. People can approach you with projects. How do you work together, or do you create your own?
Can book us for their balconies, you mean?
No, in general, or do you work on your own? You create your
No,
work
we
like artists.
We respond to invitations.
We respond to invitations, indeed. So we really both. I mean, we as you understand, like we both have like the want to really respond it in an infrastructural way. These invitations we receive, and to really like take care of a context with a different question. And of course, it is about the collaborative engagement. It is about the feminist engagement. It is about a different horizontal share of powers, and it's also giving power also different meaning in that moment of share. So, yeah. But we would like to really like also exercise it through the like situations or the projects that are, let's say, sent to our care in a certain way, or are addressed to our care, and how we can find really like a sensible way of working with it each time new, rather than repeating the same format over and over again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, now really stunning to female curators, you know, working in Berlin from the Polish and Turkish background, creating a project for that international neighborhood, but also the very German neighborhood, as you pointed out, with the names in it, and that then went on to become a kind of a global initiative. It's stunning, I think. And for us, who we are also looking for new forms for the new times we live in, I think certainly this is something where one asks, why hasn't it happened before? It seems so simple, as you said. It's kind of instructional art, and it was not so very expensive compared to what you think, how much it costs to bring a company, to fly in a big company, you know, with 20, 30, 40 members, and how much impact does it really has on one neighborhood sometimes, you know, if it's just in the big houses. But I think they are not this or that. I think we have to have additional engagements, and there are the great Berlin Festspiele, and who also did the great down-to-earth project, you know, it happened in the park without electricity, and but just with sunlight, and then there's something new coming out of that city of Berlin that is important for all of us. So thank you. Really for sharing. Anything else it's on your mind? Maybe tell us a little bit what helped you to get through that time. What did you guys read? What did you listen to? What inspired you? What should our listeners say? This is interesting. Follow that. Is there some tips you have for us?
There's always this question: what's your favorite book? And then you're like,
you get to know what you're reading, not favorite. What have you been reading? You know, so not favorite, but what has been memeaningful in the last year?
Well, I've read a classic of queer, but it's U.S. American, so I guess everybody knows it comes from the Argonauts. This is what I have read recently: the queer life of a scholar from California. But it doesn't have to do. And from the professional side, I would definitely recommend an anthology which is online about anti-racist curating. What does it mean to curate in an anti-racist way? It has been edited by free editors. Nora Sternfeld is one of them. So those are my recent readings, both private and professional.
From my side, I would say Gloria Anzaldúa, The Borderlands, a text I think very well known also in US, the Chicana theoretician, artist, and writer, which also I had the chance to study with my students, which was really powerful as an experience also altogether. And it was really also very good to revisit Angela Davis's Race, Class, Gender for intersectional thinking. So these, I think, and then alongside, maybe I should also like talk a book that really also deeply shaken me was Saidiya Hartman's Lose Your Mother. That really deeply touched me in this period. Mm-hmm. And it also really inspired for how you can create a new language out of a very particular, very deep trauma, how you manage to write a new history and a new relation on top of it, with it, and change the collective memory. So I would say these are my three.
Fantastic. Yeah. So I hope to see you all both in New York or in Berlin when I'm there. Really let us know what you are doing. Anybody wants to do the Balkone project in New York City, call us. It's, as you said, it's a grassroots movement. It's open. And or other stuff. So really, thank you for taking the time for talking to us. And
Frank, thank you for wonderful moderation.
Well, thank you for wonderful.
I wish it would be wonderful.
This is really one of the best moderations that we really had. It's really fun. Thank you for your questions. Definitely.
Good. I didn't know you had so many. I thought I just discovered you guys, and nobody had ever heard of you. And, no. But that is no. It is really. We heard about the project. I think there was also a short mentioning in the Times. I didn't see it, Florian. Of course, that Frank. Think about that also. And but I'm so glad we have you too. Next week we will have Paulette Richards, Manuel Moran, and the great Claudia Orenstein, who writes so much about puppetry. She did the Rutledge Companion, and it's about socially engaged way how puppetry can connect to the times we are here. So they are thinking about new ways to perform their puppets, their objects, and in that new time we live in. Friday, we have a great French, African-French director, Penda Diop, playwright Penda Diop and Marine Bachelot-Nguyen, and they will talk about their work in France and what it means for them and in a reality, in that also changing reality. And we're still working with other the speakers. So Wednesday is not 100% confirmed yet, but we will know much more soon. So thank you all to our listeners for listening in. I think that was truly a very interesting and important update from Europe. And the work is of significance and importance. And we really have to think about it. And as I always say, think about also what does it say for our lives, because we shouldn't just consume and the arts or see the entertainment. How can you in your apartment, share your work, invite people, invite your neighbors, create little performances or do readings at home, or hang something out of your window if you can, and reach out and think about the history, where you live, where the neighborhood comes from. Maybe check out the name of the streets you live in. So this is all of significance for us because it stands for something much bigger, but it's also a call to get engaged. So thanks to HowlRound again for hosting us, the great Thea and Vijay, Andy from the Segal Center, and everybody who supports us. So hope to see you again. A great weekend, and both of you enjoy finally a nice sunny weekend in Berlin, and I hope also in Portugal. It should be there nice anyway. So thank you all, and I hope you will write a little documentation about this work, photos, a little book production. You should do that and take it serious. So to have the balconies as a documentation, that's, I think visual arts are so much better than the theater people. We often do something in the moment and then it's gone, but I think this especially is a project that is someone for the history book. So thank you all, and goodbye, stay tuned, stay safe, bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye, Frank. Thank you.
Thank you again for your questions. Bye.